All right, man, peace. You know, brothers, there's an old saying that one has to know how to dress properly for the occasion. And that occasion could be anything. You know that if you're going to a wedding, that you have to wear a suit. If you're going to work, you have to wear business attire. If you're going out on a so-called date, then you dress a certain way. If you're going to the beach, you wear your swim trunks or your bikini or what have you. If you're going to war, you wear your fatigues. Unfortunately, for many modern day people, in an attempt to perpetuate or propagate some level of discord, confusion, or chaos, they try to act as if they're ignorant to that notion. And of course, this situation has reared its ugly head with Miss or Mr., whatever you prefer. Let me stop playing before the liberal blacks get upset. That certainly seems to be the case with this storyline surrounding Miss Serena Williams and the French Open deciding that they're going to create a new law forbidding her so-called CATSUIT. And of course, for any one of us who are familiar with tennis, we know that even though sometimes the females tend to push the boundaries of how they dress, for the most part, we know how a female is supposed to dress for a tennis match. Well, of course, Serena Williams, being the liberal female, really the paragon of modern black female liberalism that she is. I call her the black mother goddess of the sports world because that's what she is. She truly is the black androgynous sports goddess because she represents both the masculine and feminine principle, but that's another video for another day. She's been put on a pedestal and she's been allowed to push the boundaries. And anyone who's been involved in any type of administration or legislation, you know that if you don't make sure that you have codified laws and rules to maintain order, there's always going to be someone who tries to push the boundaries in order to promote chaos. And unfortunately, that is what Miss Serena Williams decided to do. In the French Open, they did the right thing by outlawing her so-called CATSUIT, which was really just a desperate attempt to attention monger, which is so common today, especially amongst liberal black females. The same people, and really all liberal females, who claim that their bodies are being sexualized by men. As I've stated in previous videos, it wasn't until the feminist movement that the attire of females became sexualized, because before that, when men were establishing the code of ethics or societal mores in regards to how people should dress, when men were in control, the woman wore a long dress and she actually was desexualized. During the feminist movement, the female was taught that she had to be in control of her own sexuality and in control of her own body, and they immediately decided that they were going to start sexualizing themselves and wear less and less clothes. This has led to the sense of competition amongst women, which of course has led to the low self-esteem amongst women and the body issues. So of course they're going to talk about it, and I'm going to chime in. And of course they're going to try to turn it into a so-called racial issue when it's just a propriety issue. That's all it is. Once again, wherever you go, there's a certain way that you have to dress. And if you don't want to abide by that, then you can't be in that environment.
This is arguably, some consider not arguably, the greatest player of all time. What exactly did she do besides be too bootylicious for you to handle?
By the way, America,
Serena Williams will no longer be allowed, last day behavior, will no longer be allowed to wear her black catsuit at the French Open. The French Tennis Federation president says the tournament is introducing a new dress code that regulates players' uniform. In an article with Tennis Magazine, the president said Serena's outfit this year, for example, would no longer be accepted. You have to respect the game and the place.
And that's very good. And once again, brothers, I agree with this edict, this decree that has been put forth by Mr. Bernard Giudicelli, or however you pronounce his last name. He states it will no longer be accepted. One must respect the game and the place. We've all been in environments where somebody came into the room and they clearly were dressed not for the occasion, and they were asked to leave, or they were told that you cannot dress like that again. I'll never forget, as I've stated on this channel previously, I went to a Catholic elementary school and a Catholic high school. And one day before my sophomore year in high school, they sent my father a letter stating that on the first day of school, the students were going to have to wear their sweater and not just a button-down shirt. Well, I didn't get that memo. For whatever reason, the envelope was just on the table. Nobody had opened it. I went to school that first day. I did not have my sweater on, or whatever it was that they were requiring that I wear, and I was given detention. There was no, I never saw the letter. There wasn't the letter never got there, nothing of that nature. There were no excuses allowed. I had to suffer the consequences of not dressing properly. And when you're watching a tennis match, you prefer to be concentrating on who's winning the match as opposed to concentrating on some jangling booty meat. Because it's clear that is what Serena Williams wants you to concentrate on. She wants you to concentrate on her ass. And I made a video about this called Osculum Infame, spelled O as in Oscar, S, C-U-L-U-M. Last word, I as in India, N as in Nancy, F as in Frank, A, M as in Michael, E. It involves ass worship and demonology. That is why this society extols Serena Williams and Kim Kardashian so much. And don't get it twisted. A fat ass is a beautiful thing. But I don't need to constantly be reminded about how I should be worshiping some woman's ass. And it's very obvious that many of these famous females feel like they have nothing else to offer other than their oftentimes surgically inflated ass because they keep putting it in our face. Can't I just watch the damn tennis match? Do I have to see you running up and down in a catsuit when it's very obvious that you're not properly dressed for the occasion?
That's from Roland Garros. LZ, so look, I'll go to you first because you and I both have covered tennis, and Serena's known for these catsuits.
Yes.
And she simply said this one that she wore this year, all black with the red belt, reminded her of Marvel's Black Panther, and she.
Oh, definitely. That's liberal black woman 101. As I tell you brothers all the time, the so-called pro-black woman or liberal black woman is not your friend. She has the racialist altar that she uses simply to get attention. Don't I tell you brothers that all the time? When the so-called pro-black woman tries to utilize the racialist tactic, it is only for attention mongering. It has nothing to do with the welfare or the benefit of her people whatsoever, because once again, the vast majority of so-called black women are liberal, 95 to 98% by my estimation. And they consider themselves their own race, their own demographic. Most of them do not even consider themselves so-called black. They consider black women to be their own race. The only reason why they claim all this racialist nonsense is to get attention. That is why Serena Williams is claiming so-called Black Panther. You're so interested in the Black Panther and Wakanda that you're with a so-called white man and you had his baby. How is that making sense? It doesn't make sense. You know why? Because it doesn't have to. Nothing has to make sense in the world of the liberal black woman.
And she thought she'd inspire a new generation.
Yeah, she thought that she would inspire a new generation of so-called young black females to walk out in the street with a spandex bodysuit on and then complain that men are hitting on them. Because isn't that what most liberal black women complain about? That so-called black men and men in general don't know how to respect them and that they're being sexualized, allegedly. Even though every time they leave their home, they're trying to expose as much of their body as possible. So what exactly is Serena Williams doing? How is she inspiring anybody by wearing a damn catsuit?
Your take on them saying her catsuit isn't right?
I need them to clarify exactly what about her outfit is offensive to the game of tennis.
I'm not quite sure, so you tell me. Isn't it common in almost every sport for you to have regulations in regards to how you wear your uniform or your attire or what have you? In boxing, when the two boxers come to meet together with the referee will tell a certain boxer, your belt line is too high, or your trunks are too high, or your protector is too high. That's what certain boxers will be told. In football, we know that Odell Beckham and Antonio Brown have been fined for writing certain messages on their cleats. We all know what happened in basketball with the uniform regulations that were initiated by David Stern, where players were told that they were wearing their shorts too long, or even their dress code in coming to the game. This is nothing new. When you're running a business, you have to make sure that the image of your business is something that's palatable for your constituency, for your fan base. No, people do not want to come to the arena and watch Serena Williams' body parts jiggling back and forth as she's playing tennis. I'm sorry if you cannot grasp that. If your excuse is, well, she's a big, bountiful black woman, she can't help it. Sure, she can help it. She can dress properly just like everybody else. I'm sure a lot of people are going to get upset by that. Once again, a fat ass is a beautiful thing. It's most beautiful in the bedroom when it's up in the air, not out in the street.
Three-time champion. This is arguably, some consider not arguably, the greatest player of all time. What exactly did she do besides be too bootylicious for you to handle that?
Once again, brothers, are you hearing this? It is very common for the so-called black homosexual and homosexuals, period, to form a league with the mega feminists. Because their real intent is to tear down any form of male hegemony. They never want a man to tell them what to do, even though the man is the only entity that will provide any form of order. If we were to leave the average so-called advocate for homosexual, transgender, lesbian, and feminist rights to their own devices, society would cripple in a matter of moments because they have no idea how to establish order. All they want to do is push against it. And they want to see how much of their bullshit and their rhetoric you're going to listen to, because they don't even believe their own line of bullshit. They don't even believe their own shit. They just want to see if they can get you to believe it.
That was offensive to the game. I need them to clarify that.
Yeah, this just seems like all out hating. And she did it for a very good reason. And especially...
Yeah, she did it for a very good reason. She's trying to get kids to be like the Black Panther. Dress up in black spandex and then go get impregnated by a white man. That makes a lot of sense.
A player that has meant so much to this game. The disrespect is what they're doing to her by instituting this dress code.
Yeah.
Because this isn't because players have somehow run rampant with disrespecting the game with outfits and have gotten all out of pocket. This is...
Absolutely. You have to nip it in the bud. Why should you wait for everybody else to do it? Nip it in the bud right away.
It's strictly a rule directed at Serena Williams.
Yes.
And how...
Well, the NBA dress code was for the most part directed at Allen Iverson, but it was good for the league. At the time, a lot of people thought that it was racially motivated, and partially it was. But you cannot let the lower aspects of the so-called black community dictate what the NBA does. Because for the most part, a lot of people are not going to like what I'm saying right now. It's okay. The lower aspects of the so-called black community, they dictate overall to what the masses of so-called black people are expected to conform to and follow. You have many intelligent so-called black men out there who just don't say anything because they're concerned that if they speak their mind, they're going to be branded weak or sellout or coon or this. Because for the most part, the most vocal aspects of the so-called black community are the woke people. Normally single mothers, reformed so-called thugs, degenerates, pea-brains, so on and so forth. So in other words, you have to nip things in the bud right away. And you can never allow the lower aspects of a society or a community to dictate to you how things are going to go, because their ideologies are not even working for them. So why would their ideologies work for you? If you're the chairman of the French Open or what have you, you cannot allow women to just start dressing in catsuits for the damn game, unless your ratings are just so low that you're like the lingerie football league. We just need any attention that we can get. And the French Open doesn't need that. They don't need to have Serena Williams out there in a damn catsuit. We all know that she does not represent the so-called European ideal of beauty anyway. So if that's what you're trying to force on them, that's not going to work. And once again, I'm sure that there are going to be some pro-black Negroes who get upset because I'm talking about their goddess, Serena Williams. Once again, Serena Williams don't give a shit about your black ass. She's with a white man.
And how can you treat the best player in your game this way? That's utterly despicable.
They weren't even slick with it. Like, a slick way to put in the rule and then use someone else as an example.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Or maybe they were not concerned with being slick. Maybe they were being direct and straightforward. Why be slick when you have the power to be straightforward?
Right. Use Serena as an example.
For example,
Like,
you know,
come on, man. Like, that's just, it's so obvious and so blatant, but guess what? She'll beat them all,
But there's,
no matter what
there's
she
levels to
wears.
this.
I would hope so. She has some male DNA in her. She should be winning a lot of these tournaments. Allegedly, she does. Allegedly. Look, brothers, at the end of the day, we're going to be the ones that have to teach the so-called black woman how to dress properly and what her mentality should be. And that's not going to happen for a very long time, because we have to spend this time period right now getting ourselves together. But these storylines like this, all this is for is to once again make the liberal black female believe that she can and should dress however she wants, and it's not going to have any repercussions on herself or on her community. As Serena Williams herself stated, she dressed like that, allegedly she dressed like that to influence other young females. She wasn't dressed like that to influence young black men, because she don't really care about so-called young black men. She's a paragon for younger so-called black females. And the image that she was trying to convey to them is dress however you want, sexualize yourself, and don't think about the possible ramifications of how you dress. And the chairman of the French Open rightfully stepped in and said, no, ma'am, not here. This is not that type of party.
It's because she is arguably one of the greatest athletes of all time. And I'm not saying male or female.
Athlete.
She was
Yeah,
never
period.
athlete.
Well, male or female, that distinction would not apply to her anyway, because she seems to be a little bit of both, allegedly.
Period. They would never do this to Michael Jordan. They
No.
never do this to LeBron
They wouldn't do
James.
this to a man, period.
They would not do this to a man, period. For them to specifically say something that
Here we go with the normal misogynist angle that many of these older liberal black women like to run to. Once again, brothers, the racialist angle is only a way to garner attention for themselves. Because the liberal black female understands underneath all her rhetoric, most people don't believe her. So she has to play the racial angle to try to act as if it's about race. And then her end game is truly to bring it back around to misogyny. Supposedly, they would not do this to Michael Jordan and they would not do this to so-and-so. As I've already stated, there have been dress code reforms made in all the major sports, all the major male sports. And as I've also stated, even in boxing, it is very common for a referee to tell a fighter, make sure that you have your cup properly placed so that it's not too high. Make sure that your trunks are not too high. You have to adjust this, you have to adjust that. If a fighter's hand wraps are coming undone, he has to go back to the corner. He just can't come out however he feels like coming out for style or for show. It has to abide by certain rules and regulations. That's why I tell you, these females are agents of chaos. And the spineless dudes that follow them, they're agents of chaos as well. These two guys on the panel, one of them is a homosexual. The other one, Amin, I'm not even sure what's going on with him. Maybe he's an undercover simp, who knows? Or just a fan of Serena Williams. But he's going on and on about something that I'm sure that if he was away from this panel, he probably disagrees with. He'd be speaking a different tune. I have little doubt about that.
That she wore was wrong or disrespectful to the game. I need you to tell me, is Rafa's shorts too tight? Is that disrespectful to the game? Not that they're tight, but I'm giving an example.
Capri.
So if they're not too tight, why are you giving that as an example?
And so whatever,
Why do you wear
but it's so disrespectful to her because of what she's done for this game, and they continue to.
So in other words, Kerry Champion, let me get this straight. Because of the amount of success that you've been able to accrue in whatever field it is that you're in, you should be able to do whatever the hell you want. That's what you're saying. No, ma'am, it doesn't work like that. And even with Michael Jordan, she stated they would never do this to Michael Jordan. You know, when the Jordan 1s first came out, the big splash that they made was that they were black and red, mostly black and red. The league was fining him every day that he wore those sneakers. And Nike said, we'll pay the fine for you just so that we can get free promotion. So once again, these idiots, they don't know what they're talking about. But they're trying to push this misogyny bullshit because they want the so-called black woman to continue to be a big agent of chaos.
Continue to disrespect her.
Yeah, and it's not just disrespectful. Honestly, it's borderline racist. I mean, really. I mean, because...
What a shock. Here we go. Jamel X at it again. Because, as we all know, she's going to be the new person to lead so-called black people out of the darkness into the light. Brothers, all this person is, and never has been, is an attention whore. I told you that for the most part, most of these liberal movements are normally centered around females that have a hard time getting attention in their daily life. That's why you see she makes so many inflammatory statements. She's a hot take artist, someone who's seeking attention. I'm going to be doing a video about her because a lot of brothers have hit me up asking about whether or not I'm going to speak about Jemele Hill getting let go from ESPN. Of course, that was going to happen eventually. It did not surprise me at all. It was just a matter of time because they didn't want to make it look too blatant. But this person is just an anchor. She's going to weigh down whoever she's associated with. Expect her to pop up on CNBC or MSNBC or CNN or whatever. One of these liberal news networks will have her. And she'll also probably be popping up on Fox Sports 1 every once in a while. But I think that she's going to be a free agent for the most part. And she's going to unleash her big mouth and talk nonsense. But like I was saying, look up a tennis player by the name of Ann White. This was a Caucasian tennis player in the mid-'80s who also wore a catsuit at Wimbledon. Now, Wimbledon demands that their participants wear all white. And after the first day that she wore the catsuit, one of the officials there told her, do not wear that outfit again. And she said, no problem.
About it.
No, I mean, because when you said you would like the French president, the French Open president, to explain what is it that's disrespectful, I guarantee you that conversation is not going to a good place. Mm-hmm. Because anything he has to...
Well, why would it go to a good place? What is a good place? A good place is something that makes you feel good. I'm sorry, but discipline and order is not about what makes you feel good. It's what's best for the collective. That's why you're not fit to be a leader. Where you should be led to is back to the kitchen and to the bedroom, where you can assist your husband and your family in your role. But for most of you bugged out liberal women, there's no help for you. I'm sure a lot of people are not going to like that. It is what it is. I guarantee you that off camera, Miss Jemele Hill is dealing with a bevy of psychological issues. I have no doubt about that. Most of these liberal black women especially, they hide all their insecurities under their weaves and under their wigs.
Has to say.
You're right.
You know what it reminds me
of?
You're right.
This time of year, every year, we hear stories about black kids going to school and getting sent home because their hair doesn't match the dress code. And I'm always like, what about the hair is disrespectful? Whether it's in braids, whether it's in twists, whatever it is.
That's a far better point than the Serena Williams catsuit. I don't believe that one has to do with the other.
That's the first thing I thought about when I saw this.
Well, by history, we can talk about the time they disqualified or gave her points off, and that was Venus because her beads
Yes.
were giving people a hard time in Wimbledon, and they kept coming off. And they were like, if your beads come off one more time, we're going to have to take away another point. Like, it's my beads. What are you talking about?
Well, if the beads are infringing on somebody else's ability to compete with you, then they may have to come off. Once again, even in sports, in professional basketball at one time, it was okay for professional basketball players to play out on the court with chains and necklaces on. But the NBA decided that they were a distraction because they would hit other players in the face, they would come off, they would distract players, so on and so forth. That's what happens. Now, Amin El-Hassan's point about the hairstyle of so-called black children, that's totally disparate from a clothing code. And if a certain school or any other corporate entity tries to imply that it's not correct for someone to be able to wear braids or whatever hairstyle, because that does not fit the clothing code of conduct or the clothing regulations, that's something totally different from somebody who actually is infringing upon the clothing regulations.
I will say this, tennis is peculiar when it comes to dress code. Like Wimbledon, for instance, you have to wear all white. Right. Even if your underwear is a different color, if they can see the underwear.
But that has been a
long-standing sort of kind of thing. The Serena Williams rule, just go into the U.S. Open, wear what you want to wear, boo.
All right.
And then win.
That ain't even cold. That's blatant.
Keep winning.
When we come back, we got to...
No, it does not have to be any code or blatant. All it is them telling you that, you know what, you have to dress a certain way. Whatever environment you're in, you have to dress appropriate to your environment, Ms. Jamel Hill. Like, for example, if ESPN told you they wanted you to cover up them turkey wing arms that you have the right to get upset, but you also have the right to say, is that in the dress code? And if it's not in the dress code, then you can continue to show them turkey wings that you have until they change the rule. But you don't have to worry about that anyway, because they finally fired your dumb ass. Okay, so now let's see what Stephen A. Smith and Max Kellerman have to say about the Serena Williams catsuit narrative.
All right, I want to talk about something they just said that happened over the weekend. So Serena Williams' catsuit was banned by the French Open. It was a very confusing reason why the French Tennis Federation president...
No, it was not confusing. It was just an addendum that they added to their own law code. And once again, that happens all the time. It happens in the U.S. Constitution, that they're known as amendments. As new situations arise, you have to add corollaries to your law code. It is what it is. It's not that big a deal. The only point that I've heard thus far that was even close to being something that was semi-relevant was Amin El-Hassan stating that certain kids who happen to be so-called black oftentimes are accosted in their school for their so-called hairstyle. And even in some of these schools, they'll tell you that you cannot have your hair a certain length or what have you. But if the situation is pertaining to someone who has what's called a quote-unquote ethnic hairstyle, then that school or that institution is going to have to provide some level of specificity in regards to why they would tell that child that they cannot have that hairstyle. That to me is a totally different conversation than what the French Open is doing rightfully to Serena Williams. And as I've already stated, there's precedent for it in every major sport, no matter your gender or your so-called race. Once again, so-called black men, they try to push the envelope on a lot of these silly issues to make you think that you're supposed to go along with the chaos agenda.
President said, sometimes I think we've gone too far. What was your reaction to it?
Well, my reaction.
When he says that he thinks we've gone too far, meaning we as men have allowed a lot of these elements of society to push us towards chaos as opposed to pushing back. You never see men march for much, to be honest with you. Most of these marches are led by women and homosexuals and weak-bodied men. I mean, even the so-called Black Lesbian Matter movement is led by females. And most of the men that are involved are so-called woke or two-dimensional thinking black males, not men.
Actually, it's two things. Number one, there was a white lady in 1985 at the Wimbledon, I believe, and a white...
Thank you, Stephen A. Smith. You're the only one who did your due diligence and looked her up.
I believe it was her name, that she wore a white bodysuit. Nobody said anything.
Well, that's a lie. That's a lie, Stephen A. She was told right after the match Do not wear that again tomorrow. That's what she was told, so that's a lie.
I wonder why. Number two, and more importantly, I just want the record to show I have no problem with the bodysuit. Doesn't bother me at all. Yes, I'm very comfortable.
You weren't bothered.
To me, brothers, that's beside the point. And let me say this. A lot of brothers allow a pair of fat ass cheeks to totally distract them. That's the point of the broad wearing a catsuit in the first place. Like I stated, is to distract people. Once again, a fat ass is a beautiful thing. It's at its most beautiful state when it's in your bedroom, up in the air. I don't need to see your fat ass out in the street. I could do without that, to be honest with you. And I think that a lot of so-called black men have been convinced to believe that it's okay for women to dress scantily clad all up and down the street. That's not helping anybody. That's not helping you, and it's not helping them.
I'm more than okay in watching Serena Williams in a bodysuit. It does not bother me.
Well, Stephen A. Smith, to be quite frank with you, brother, Serena Williams is married. It's one thing to say that the female is attractive, or a lady is attractive, or the woman is attractive, or what have you. But when you go too much in depth, that's truly disrespectful. And Stephen A. Smith does do that. He did that with LeBron James' wife as well. LeBron has a very beautiful wife. Leave it at that. You don't have to start to expound on how beautiful or how gorgeous, how sexy she is. Move along.
In all seriousness, on the one hand, I get they can make their own rules. They should apply them evenly and enforce them if they want. On the other hand, what are people offended about? What feels wrong about this?
Normal liberal rhetoric. What feels wrong? You notice Max Kellerman made the same assertion that Jamel Hill did. That's why, once again, brothers, it's very common, especially when you look up a lot of the so-called revolutionary black females from the 60s and 70s. It was very common for them to marry Caucasian Jewish men. Alice Walker, who wrote A Color Purple, which was basically a hit piece on so-called black men. Before she turned lesbian, she was married to a Caucasian Jewish man.
It's almost like the powers that be are saying, well, we can't control what the best tennis player in the world looks like, but we kind of can. We can kind of make them conform to what we want them to look like. That's it.
I have news for you, Max Kellerman. Whenever you work for a corporation, one of their agendas is to make you conform to how they want you to look. That's why you're at work with a suit and tie on. That's how that works, sir. That's why you're not at work wearing a t-shirt and a pair of old boxers.
To suggest where they come from, and
that's a serious way of looking at it. Or
yes.
You sit up there and say like this, everybody ain't Serena.
Wait, Nike said this, you can take the superhero out of her costume, but you can never take away her superpowers.
And that's exactly what it boils down to. The reason why Nike outfitted her in that suit is to once again promote this element of her as a messiah figure. They do that with all their athletes, with LeBron James, Tiger Woods, etc. They knew that it would cause a splash. That's why I stated that when Michael Jordan first came out with the first Air Jordans that were predominantly black and red, the league had never really seen a pair of sneakers that were predominantly black and red. And then on an athlete like that, the NBA was fining Michael Jordan. They fined him every game that he wore those Air Jordans, and Nike told him, we'll pay the fine. It's great marketing. I guarantee you that there are a lot of women that are on Nike's website right now looking for that catsuit. But anyway, peace. All right, man, peace. So, brothers, I wanted to do a very brief epilogue in reference to the video that I just did on Miss Serena Williams and the catsuit drama that she got herself into at the French Open, to just once again convey and reinforce that what the chairman of the French Open did in prohibiting Serena Williams from wearing the catsuit had nothing to do with race. But once again, they're trying to use the racial aspect of it. And when I say they, I'm talking about the liberal sports media, particularly many of the liberal black females in the liberal sports media. They're trying to use the racial aspect as a cover for what they're really trying to push, which is the continuance of the mother goddess worship of Serena Williams. But once again, back in 1985, you had a Caucasian tennis player by the name of Anna White. Ain't that funny? They try to make this a racial issue. And the last person to try to wear a catsuit and was told to stop wearing the catsuit was a tennis player named Anna White. Ain't that a bitch? And she wore a white catsuit. point being is that at Wimbledon, you have to wear white. But what Miss Anna White tried to do is wear an all-white catsuit to Wimbledon. And she was told after her match to never wear that outfit again. Why is that? Because they're operating according to propriety. And as I tell you, brothers, so many times, the woman is like a child. The woman in her essential nature is beautiful, but they are like children. So what they will try to do is to push the borders of quote-unquote decency to see exactly how far is too far. That is their nature. That is why it is always up to the man to tell the woman, no, that's not correct. That's not allowable. We will not tolerate that. If you don't do that, the woman will be out here butt-ass naked and then acting confounded when bad things happen to her. And as I tell you, brothers, all the time, despite many of the senseless meanderings of top-level feminists who speak about how men sexualize women, it's actually always been the woman who has sexualized herself. Whenever the woman has been given an opportunity to dress herself, she dresses like this to show off her body or her quote-unquote curves, even when she does not even have curves, like this female right here, who's shaped like the number 1. But anyway, here we go. We see her or him here. To be quite frank with you, this looks like a so-called transgender as well. I'm just saying, it is what it is. Don't get upset. But this person here looks like George Bush Jr., a young version in drag. That's just me, though. And here we go once again, the synchronization of the liberal black female and the liberal Caucasian female. As I tell you, brothers, incessantly, the liberal black female talks all that race shit, but her God is the liberal Caucasian woman. Brothers, do not get that twisted, not even for a minute. That is why you have so many issues oftentimes with the so-called black woman that you're with. Well, the number one reason why the so-called black man has many issues with these women is because he's not picking the right woman. He's not putting the woman through the appropriate amount of tests so that he can understand how real a woman she is. Oftentimes, brothers rush into these relationships and try to make them serious when they're not. You cannot turn a bus into a luxury vehicle. I hope that you brothers understand that. But once again, just to get back to the point, they're trying to make this a racial issue, when in all reality, it's a propriety issue. The modern day female does not like to be told no. She does not like to be told that she's wrong, even though oftentimes they know that they're wrong. They know it already. And Serena Williams had the nerve to talk about how she wore this catsuit in honor of the film Black Panther. Meanwhile, you're married to a white panther. Ain't that a bitch? Ain't that a bitch? And as we can see, her catsuit is made by Nike, who's behind most of this nonsense, who's behind the promotion of chaos, because Nike is a Saturnian corporation. But anyway, I've made my point. Peace.